Welcome back, everyone, to the third section, Breakthroughs to Agriculture of Chapter 1, First Peoples, First Farmers. Remember, top right-hand corner is your heading, in the middle and the center is your topic. So let's get going. All right. Agricultural revolution happened independently in several world regions. The Fertile Crescent of Southwest Asia, several areas in Sub-Saharan Africa, China, Southeast Asia, New Guinea, Mesoamerica, the Andes, as well as Eastern North America, all happened at about the same time, 12,000 to 4,000 years ago. And to you, that might not sound like the same time. That's a significant number of years within that difference. However, in the all existence of humans, that's a relatively small amount of time. So it's actually about the same time period. Scholars have struggled with the question of why agriculture developed so late in human history. And the agricultural revolution coincided with the last ice age. Global warming cycle started around 16,000 years ago, as the ice age was over about 11,000 years ago. And the end of the ice age coincided with human migration across the earth as well. We see the extinction of some large mammals, climate change and hunting. Warmer, wetter weather and more stable conditions allowed for wild plants to flourish, maybe leading to the practice and some of the technologies for agriculture. Gathering and hunting peoples had already learned some ways to manage the natural world, so a quote-unquote broad spectrum diet. And there's also the development of sickles, baskets, and other tools to make use of wild grain in the Middle East. Women were probably the agricultural innovators. Gathering and hunting people started to establish more permanent villages once they had started to establish agricultural practices, especially in resource-rich areas. And so the population growth perhaps led to a quote-unquote food crisis. Thus, the need for food production, no longer food collection. Okay, so let's take a look at this map of the global spread of agriculture and pastoralism. So, from 10 or more separate points of origin, agriculture spread to adjacent areas, eventually encompassing almost all of the world's peoples. So in which continents did early pastoral societies develop? Which continents fostered no early pastoral societies? And early pastoral societies developed in Africa and Eurasia, and the continents of North and South America, Europe, and Australia did not foster these societies. So let's interpret this map. How might you describe the climatic regions where agriculture developed independently? Were they in equatorial tropical zones, Arctic zones, or regions in between called temperate zones? What factors might explain this distribution? Well, agriculture developed independently in equatorial tropical zones and in temperate zones. And this might be explained by the warmer, wetter, and more stable conditions in these zones compared to the harsher Arctic and desert zones. Okay, agriculture developed in a number of regions, but with variations that depended on the plants and animals that were available. Only a few hundred plant species have been domesticated, and only 14 large mammal species were domesticated. The Fertile Crescent was the first to have a full agricultural revolution. Here's the presence of large variety of plants and animals to be domesticated. And there's a transition to agriculture triggered by a cold and dry spell between 11,000 and 9,500 BCE. And that transition apparently only took about 500 years, which is a very short amount of time. Much more societal sophistication like mud bricks, monuments and shrines, more elaborate burials, and more sophisticated tools have been found here. At about the same time, see the domestication started in Eastern Sahara, or the present-day Sudan. The region was much more hospitable 10,000 to 5,000 years ago as compared to today. There's the domestication of cattle. They're about 1,000 years before the Middle East and India. In Africa, animals were domesticated first. Elsewhere, plants were domesticated first. We see the emergence of several widely scattered farming practices, and African agriculture was less productive than agriculture in the Fertile Crescent. There's also a separate development of agriculture in several places in the Americas. Absence of animals available for domestication. They lacked cereal grains, so instead they had to rely on maize, or what you would know now as corn. And the result was a replacement of gathering and hunting with agriculture that took about 3,500 years in Mesoamerica. So because of the lack of animals available for domestication and the lack of those cereal grains, the process of agriculture took a lot longer. And the Americas are oriented in a north-south land, so agriculture practices had to adapt to distinct climate zones to spread. If you look at the Eastern Hemisphere, we can go back up the map to do that. If you look at the Eastern Hemisphere, it's much more east-west land-oriented, and so the climate doesn't necessarily vary as you travel from east to west. But when you look at the Western Hemisphere with North and South America and this huge land orientation of north-south, you're talking about different elevations, different climates, significantly different topography, and so that's why the development of agriculture took a lot longer. Okay, so let's take a look at this map, the Fertile Crescent. Located in what is now called the Middle East, the Fertile Crescent was the site of many significant processes in early world history, including a major breakthrough to agriculture and later the development of one of the first civilizations. So how does this map explain why Mesopotamia was one of the first regions in the world to domesticate plants? Well, Mesopotamia's Fertile Crescent was favorable to the early domestication of plants because of its abundant sources of water. The Mediterranean Sea in the west, the Persian Gulf, the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and Jordan rivers, which not only allowed for extensive irrigation, but also contributed to the extraordinary variety of wild plants and animals that humans could domesticate. All right, so the statues of Ain Ghazal. Among the largest of the early agricultural settlements investigated by archaeologists is that of Ain Ghazal, located in the modern state of Jordan. Inhabited from about 7200 to, or excuse me, 72 BCE to 5000 BCE. In its prime, it was home to some 3,000 people who lived in multi-roomed stone houses. They cultivated barley, wheat, peas, beans, and lentils, and herded domesticated goats. These remarkable statues, around 3 feet tall, and made of limestone plaster applied to a core of bundled reeds, were among the most startling finds at that site. So did they represent heroes, gods, goddesses, or ordinary people? No one really knows. So how are these statues evidence of the specialization of labor, which became a key trait of agricultural societies? These large statues made of bundled reeds and limestone plaster suggest the existence of an artisan class. This only would have been possible in a settled, village-based society that was able to store food and allow more time for the development of this degree of specialized labor for artisans. And that's the end of this section. I will see you guys next time.